You are not antisocial. You are not rude. You are not broken. Something in you closes the door before a single word is spoken, and you have spent years apologizing for it. Carl Jung would tell you the opposite of what you've been told. He would tell you that the moment you feel your stomach tighten at the words, "Can I come over?" you are not failing at being a good person. You are watching your own unconscious defend something sacred. Here is a fact that will sound strange until it doesn't. The reaction you feel is not social. It's psychic. It has almost nothing to do with the person knocking on your door. And it has everything to do with what happens to your inner world the moment they walk through it. Right now, today, you are paying a price for not understanding this. Every time someone invites themselves over and you say yes out of guilt, you lose something you don't get back. Every time you cancel your own peace to perform hospitality, a part of you goes quiet for days. You know this feeling. The dread that starts hours before the doorbell rings. The exhaustion that hits the second the door closes behind them, even though nothing happened. The strange, disproportionate relief of being alone again. If you felt that, you're not imagining it. And by the end of this video you'll understand exactly what it is, why it happens, and why the people who feel it most are often the ones closest to real psychological maturity. This isn't a video about being introverted. It's a video about protecting the one place your mind was never meant to share. Most people think this comes down to personality. Introvert, extrovert, shy, sociable. That explanation is comfortable. It's also incomplete. Jung spent his life studying something deeper than personality, the structure of the psyche itself and how it defends its own integrity. What you're about to learn is that your resistance to visitors is not a preference. It's a mechanism. A guard posted at the border of something Jung called the self. And once you see how that guard operates, you will never again feel guilty for locking the gate. Let's start with the house. Not the walls, not the furniture, the house as your mind understands it. In Jung's framework, the home is rarely just shelter. It functions as a symbol, an external structure that mirrors an internal one. Jung himself, in his own reflections on dream analysis, described the house as one of the most consistent images the unconscious uses to represent the psyche. Different rooms, different floors, different levels of a house, in dream after dream, patient after patient, kept mapping onto different layers of the self. The parts shown to the world, the parts kept private, the parts barely acknowledged even by the person living there. Think about your own home for a second. The living room you'll show anyone. The bedroom you'll show almost no one. The drawer, the folder, the corner you'd never show anyone at all. That's not decorating. That's architecture of the psyche, built in physical space. So when someone asks to come over, they are not asking to enter a building. They are asking, whether they know it or not, to enter a boundary you've drawn around your own inner life. And your unconscious knows the difference, even when your conscious mind is still busy typing, "Sure, come by." This is why some visits feel completely fine, and others feel like an intrusion you can't explain. It was never really about the visit. It was about which room they were being let into. A coworker in the entryway cost you almost nothing. A distant relative wandering into your bedroom, uninvited, rearranging what they find there, that cost you something real even if all they did was sit on your couch and drink your coffee. Because the couch was never just a couch. It was inside the boundary. Jung himself built this principle into stone, literally. Later in his life, he constructed a retreat at Bollingen, a tower by the water, and he was famously particular about who was allowed inside it. Colleagues, admirers, even some family were kept at the threshold. Not out of arrogance. Out of necessity. He needed a space where the persona could fully come off, where the raw material of his own inner work could exist without an audience. If the man who mapped the unconscious for a living needed a locked door to protect his own psyche, what makes you think you don't need one too? And once you understand that your home operates as a map of your inner world, the next question becomes obvious. If the house is the boundary, what exactly is being protected inside it? That's where the mask comes in. The moment another person is physically present in your space, something in you switches on automatically, and you rarely choose when. Jung called it the persona, the social mask, the version of you built specifically for the outside world to look at. Not a fake self, exactly. More like a costume your psyche wears so the raw material underneath doesn't have to be handled by strangers. The persona smiles when it's tired. It makes small talk about the weather when it would rather sit in silence. It offers a second cup of coffee it doesn't want to make. None of that is dishonest. It's functional. Society runs on it. But here's what almost nobody tells you. The persona is not free. Every minute you wear it, you are spending energy, real psychic energy, the same limited resource your mind uses for thinking, creating, regulating your own emotions. And the moment a visitor sits down in your living room, the meter starts running. You laugh at a joke that wasn't funny. That costs something. You perform interest in a story you've heard 4 times. That costs something. You monitor your tone, your face, your posture, making sure none of it slips into how you actually feel. That costs something too, second by second, for as long as they stay. This is the true price of hospitality that nobody puts in the invitation. Not the coffee, not the time, the depletion. By the time the door finally closes, you're not just tired the way you're tired after work. You're tired the way you're tired after holding a heavy object at arm's length for 2 hours. Because that's what the persona is, held out, on display, performing steadiness the entire time someone else is watching. And here's the part that reframes everything. Wanting that performance to stop is not antisocial. It's not cold. It's your psyche correctly recognizing that it has a limited supply of a resource, and refusing to hand it out for free every time someone rings the bell. There's a specific danger Jung warned about, one that almost never gets mentioned when people talk about the persona. Identification. That's when the mask stops being a tool you put on and take off, and quietly becomes the only self you know how to be. The people who never protect their space, who say yes to every visit, every gathering, every request for their presence, often aren't more generous. They've simply lost the boundary between the performance and the person underneath it. Ask them what they actually want on a random Tuesday evening with no one watching, and many of them will hesitate because they've spent so long being available that they've forgotten how to be alone with themselves without discomfort. Guarding your door isn't just protecting your energy today. It's keeping the line visible between the mask and the face underneath, so the two never quietly become the same thing. Ask yourself honestly, when you dread a visit, are you dreading the person, or are you dreading the hours of unpaid performance that come with them? Most people have never separated those two things. Once you do, guilt starts to look a lot less like guilt and a lot more like math. Now here's where most people get the diagnosis wrong. They hear, "I don't want visitors," and they reach for the nearest label. Shy, socially anxious, avoidant. Sometimes that's accurate. Social anxiety is real, and it deserves real care, not a Jungian reframe that dismisses it. But there's a second category entirely, one that gets mistaken for the first constantly, and it operates on the opposite logic. Social anxiety says, "I'm afraid of what will happen if people see me." Conscious refusal says something completely different. "I know exactly what will happen, and I've decided the cost isn't worth it today." Fear versus calculation. Panic versus a closed door chosen on purpose. One person cancels plans because their chest is tight and their mind is spiraling with worst-case scenarios. Another person cancels plans because they did the math on their own energy and the number came back negative. From the outside, both look identical. A text that says, "Something came up." From the inside, they are almost opposite experiences. One is being controlled by fear. The other is exercising control on purpose without apology. This is the distinction Jung's work keeps circling back to again and again in his descriptions of psychological energy. The psyche has a finite amount of it, and a mature psyche learns to allocate it deliberately instead of leaking it out to whoever asks first. Saying no to a visit from that place isn't withdrawal from fear. It's allocation from clarity. You are not hiding from the world. You are choosing with full awareness not to spend a limited resource on a transaction that won't refill it. Notice something else about this kind of refusal. It doesn't need an excuse. Fear needs excuses. "I have a headache. I'm not feeling well," because fear feels like it has to justify itself to survive contact with another person's disappointment. Conscious refusal doesn't reach for an excuse nearly as fast, because it isn't answering to anyone's disappointment in the first place. It's answering to its own honest read on its own energy. That's the whole difference. Not what you say no to, why you're able to say it, and how much explaining you feel forced to do afterward. If you've spent years assuming your reluctance was a flaw to manage, sit with this for a second. What if some of it was never anxiety at all? What if it was your psyche, correctly, quietly, refusing to overdraw an account it already knew was running low? There's a reason this distinction maps so closely onto Jung's broader work on psychological types. He spent years documenting how introverted psychology processes the world. Energy flows inward first, toward reflection, before it's ever offered outward toward people or events. That's not a deficiency needing correction. It's a different engine running on different fuel, and it runs out at a different rate than the extrovert engine sitting next to it at the same dinner table. Two people can sit through the exact same 2-hour visit, and one of them leaves recharged, energized by the company, while the other leaves running on fumes, not because anything went wrong, but because the visit itself was the expense for one of them and the income for the other. Neither engine is broken. They just weren't built to run the same way. That single reframe changes everything that comes next. Before we go further, one thing worth saying directly. If any part of this video felt like it was describing you, the version of you that protects a home, a schedule, an inner life that isn't for public consumption, that's worth paying attention to. If this channel is helping you understand yourself with more precision than the labels you were handed, subscribe, because we're about to go somewhere most videos on this topic never take you. We're about to talk about what actually gets interrupted when you let the world in more than you meant to, and it's bigger than one afternoon of small talk. Every time you let a visit override what you actually needed that day, something else quietly stops. Jung called it individuation, the lifelong process of becoming the specific whole person you actually are underneath every role you've ever played. Not becoming a better version of some generic template. Becoming undeniably, irreducibly yourself, layer by layer, over years. That process needs conditions to happen in. Mainly, it needs uninterrupted time turned inward, time where nobody is watching, evaluating, or requiring a performance from you. Individuation doesn't happen in a crowded room. It happens in the quiet after the door closes. So when a visit gets forced onto a day that was supposed to hold that quiet, something real gets displaced, not physically, psychologically. The hour you would have spent noticing what you actually feel gets spent instead noticing whether your guest is comfortable. The evening that could have surfaced a decision you've been avoiding gets spent avoiding an awkward silence at your own kitchen table instead. This is the part almost nobody names. Hospitality, when it's obligatory instead of chosen, doesn't just cost energy. It costs direction. It pulls you out of your own internal process and back onto someone else's schedule of expectations, again and again, until you can barely remember what you were working through before they arrived. Think of individuation like a conversation you're having with yourself, one that started years ago and never fully finished. Every uninterrupted evening is another sentence in that conversation. Every obligatory visit is someone walking into the room mid-sentence and changing the subject. Do that enough times, week after week, year after year, and you lose the thread completely. You stop being able to hear yourself think, not because thinking stopped, but because it kept getting interrupted before it could finish a single thought. This is why the pull towards solitude gets stronger, not weaker, the more self-aware a person becomes. It's not that they've decided people are bad. It's that they've finally noticed how much of themselves gets rerouted every time someone else's expectations take priority over their own unfinished internal work. Ask yourself, what conversation with yourself have you not finished because it kept getting interrupted by someone at the door? You already know the answer. You've known it for a while. That's the individuation being stalled, quietly, one polite visit at a time, and the fact that it bothers you is not a character flaw. It's a sign the process underneath is still alive, still trying to continue, still waiting for a room empty enough to keep going in. Here's the part that will feel uncomfortable, and it's the part most people never let themselves look at directly. Underneath the tiredness, underneath the calendar math, there's often something else driving the resistance to visitors. The fear of being seen too clearly. Jung called the hidden, unacknowledged parts of a person the shadow. Everything pushed out of the light because it didn't fit the persona, the mask built for public view. Anger that doesn't match your nice person image. Need that doesn't match your independent image. Grief you haven't processed, sitting quietly in a room you don't invite people into, literally or otherwise. When someone enters your space uninvited or invited but unwelcome, they don't just see your living room. Sometimes they get close enough to sense what's underneath it, the mess you haven't sorted, the mood you're not performing, the version of you that exists when nobody's supposed to be watching. And some part of you, the part guarding the self, knows exactly how close that gets to something you're not ready to show. This is why certain visits feel disproportionately unbearable, far more than the actual conversation should justify. It was never really about the small talk. It was about how exposed you felt while making it, how close the mask came to slipping in front of someone who wasn't supposed to see underneath it. Jung was direct about what happens when the shadow stays hidden instead of acknowledged. It doesn't disappear, it just operates without your permission, showing up as irritability you can't quite explain, or a sharpness in your voice that surprises even you. The irony is that the very people most afraid of visitors seeing too much are usually the ones doing the deepest internal work on what they'd rather keep hidden. Shallow people rarely fear exposure because there's little underneath the surface to expose. It's the ones actively wrestling with something real, grief, anger, an unresolved chapter of their own story, who feel a visitor's presence like a spotlight aimed at a room they haven't finished cleaning. That discomfort isn't a flaw in you. It's evidence that real work is happening in there, whether you've named it yet or not. Here's where the story usually gets misread from the outside though, and it matters. Other people watching you decline visit after visit tend to build their own explanation for it, because unexplained behavior makes people uncomfortable, and discomfort demands a story. So they reach for the easiest one: you must be cold. You must think you're better than everyone. You must be avoiding them specifically. Jung would call this projection, when someone can't tolerate not understanding your behavior, so they take a piece of their own unprocessed material, their own fear of rejection, their own discomfort with boundaries, and they hang it on you like a coat on a hook. It was never really information about you. It was a mirror they didn't recognize as a mirror. The friend who calls you distant might be someone who's never learned to protect their own space, and your boundary makes their lack of one uncomfortably visible. The relative who calls you arrogant might be someone who equates love with unlimited access, and your limit threatens that equation without you saying a single confrontational word. None of that means you did something wrong. It means your boundary landed on someone else's unresolved material, and they handed the discomfort back to you, repackaged as a character judgment. You are allowed to let that judgment be theirs. You don't have to carry a story that was never really about you in the first place. This is the part that changes everything once you see it clearly enough. The discomfort someone else feels around your closed door is a measurement of their relationship to boundaries, not a measurement of your worth. Once you stop absorbing that projection as truth, something shifts. The apology you used to reach for automatically starts to feel unnecessary, then eventually starts to feel dishonest, because you'd be apologizing for a story that was never yours to begin with. There's a strange thing that happens to people once they start protecting this space on purpose instead of by accident. The solitude that once felt like a symptom starts to feel like a skill. Jung tied psychological maturity directly to a widening gap between two things: how much a person understands on their own, and how much they still need a crowd to agree with them before they'll trust it. He called this the difference between mere intelligence and something rarer, consciousness in the fuller sense, the capacity to know something is true even when almost no one around you can see it yet. That gap doesn't close as people mature. It widens. And widening that gap requires exactly the thing most people spend their whole life avoiding: time alone with your own conclusions before anyone else has approved of them. This is where mass mentality enters the picture, quietly, almost invisibly. Groups don't just share opinions. They enforce them through comfort for agreement and subtle punishment for departure. A raised eyebrow, a joke at your expense, a slow withdrawal of warmth. Most people learn to read that punishment early, and most people learn to avoid it by simply not straying too far from consensus, ever, on almost anything that matters. The problem is, truth doesn't check with consensus before it becomes true. And a psyche trained to seek agreement over accuracy will, without meaning to, start softening its own perceptions just enough to stay comfortable inside the group. This is the real reason most people quietly prefer comfort to truth. Not because they're weak. Because the nervous system is wired to treat social rejection like physical danger, and truth, real truth, has a long history of getting people rejected. But here's what happens to someone who keeps choosing solitude anyway, deliberately, again and again, instead of trading their own perception for the room's approval. Their independent thought doesn't weaken from disuse. It strengthens from practice. And a mind that has practiced trusting itself without a crowd's permission becomes very, very hard to manipulate, because manipulation depends on one thing above all else: your need for someone else's approval outweighing your loyalty to your own perception. Take that need away and the leverage disappears with it. Jung knew this cost personally, long before he ever wrote about it as theory. When he broke from Freud, publicly, over ideas the wider psychoanalytic community wasn't ready to accept, he lost colleagues, status, an entire professional family built around agreement. He spent years afterward largely alone with his own research, unsupported by the consensus that used to hold him up. That isolation wasn't a side effect of his ideas. It was the price of trusting his own perception over the room's approval, paid in real relationships, real reputation, real years of walking without a crowd behind him. He kept going anyway, not because isolation felt good, but because he'd already seen what happens to a mind that trades its own clarity for the comfort of staying agreed with. This is the real, unspoken cost of individuation, the reason Jung connected it so directly to solitude instead of celebration. Waking up to a clearer version of your own thinking again and again tends to separate you slowly, sometimes painfully, from people still operating entirely inside the group's approved reality. You start noticing things they'd rather not examine. You stop laughing at jokes that used to feel harmless. You start needing far less noise, far less company, far less constant reassurance than you used to require just to feel okay. That's not coldness. That's a nervous system that has finally stopped outsourcing its sense of reality to whoever happens to be in the room. And yes, there's a real risk sitting right next to this kind of growth, one worth naming directly instead of glossing over: mistaking clarity for superiority. Genuine individuation doesn't make you look down on people still caught in the crowd's rhythm. It makes you understand exactly why they're there, because you remember being there yourself not so long ago. The version of this that curdles into arrogance isn't wisdom. It's ego wearing wisdom's mask, using solitude to feel superior instead of using it to feel honest. The real marker of psychological maturity isn't distance from other people. It's the ability to stand apart from the crowd's approval without needing to stand above the people still inside it. So here's the metaphor that ties this whole video together, the one image worth carrying with you long after you stop watching. Your home was never just a building. It's the visible edge of an invisible boundary, the one your unconscious draws around the parts of you that were never meant for public consumption, the unfinished thoughts, the unprocessed feelings, the version of you that exists only when nobody's performing for anyone. Every time you decline a visit without apologizing for it, you're not rejecting a person. You're defending a threshold, one that guards something far more valuable than an afternoon of small talk. Your own unfinished becoming, still in progress, still deserving of quiet. So here's the choice, and it really is this simple underneath everything we've just walked through. You can spend your limited psychic energy performing comfort for a crowd that will forget the visit by next week. Or you can protect the one space where your actual self gets to keep developing, undisturbed, on your own timeline according to your own needs. Pleasing the room or protecting the self. You don't get both in unlimited supply. Every time you choose, you're voting for the kind of person you're becoming. There is no version of this where the choice happens once and stays made. It shows up again next weekend, and the weekend after that, every single time your phone lights up with a plan you didn't ask for. The guilt will still knock first before the clarity does. That's normal. That doesn't mean the clarity is wrong. Guilt is just the old pattern, the one trained to equate your worth with your availability, refusing to leave quietly. Let it speak. Then answer with a boundary anyway. That's not coldness toward the people asking. It's warmth, redirected toward the version of you that's still becoming, the one who needs a quiet room more than it needs another audience. If this reframes something you felt for years but never had language for, that's exactly why this channel exists. So hit subscribe, because the next video goes even further into what individuation actually costs, and what it gives back. You are allowed to close the door without a single explanation attached to it. You are allowed to let people build their own story about your boundary, and let that story stay theirs, not yours to fix, not yours to manage, not yours to carry. Your home was never required to be open. It was only ever required to be yours. So the next time someone asks to come over and something in you tightens before you've even answered, don't rush to apologize for it. Ask yourself instead the only question that actually matters. Are you protecting your peace? Or are you still performing for people who were never really invited into the parts of you that count?